Hello, everyone. Welcome to another NaNoWriMo live stream. Grand Faulkner edition. Tonight is going to go a little differently because tonight we have a special guest, as advertised and mentioned already. The executive director of NaNoWriMo has come to talk to us and share his writing wisdom. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty of the middle stages of writing your book. We are going to ask Grant about his career, spanning for over 20 years now, and most importantly, the ups and downs of running the biggest writing event in the world. But before we do all that, a little infomercial. If you watch our channel from time to time and have participated in our writing sprints, you probably know that Manuscripts is this year's sponsor of NaNoWriMo, and we are looking for spirited fiction writers. We have 600 spots open for publication in the year of 2023, and spots are filling quickly. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. The submission form is in the chat. We would love to read your book. Our literary specialist, Riley Bohr, is just itching to get her eyes on that manuscript. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And now, without further ado, please let me welcome writer, author, and the executive director of NaNoWriMo, Grant Faulkner. Hi, sir.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, thank you so much. This is going to be a fun conversation, I know.
Yeah, thank you for coming to chat with me. How are you? How is the West Coast treating you?
West Coast is good. We have a lot of, nice, crisp fall weather, very inspiring. Nice autumnal light, making the leaves on the trees very bright. So, yeah, looking forward to a lot of bright, cheery novels as a result. How about that?
Oh, yeah, fall is the weather for writing.
It is. You can't top fall.
No, you can't top fall. It's so cozy. Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, Grant. Now we obviously know each other.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
we've never seen each other in person in real life.
Not in person. That's very true.
Yeah.
We know each other. Met each other and know each other. Yes.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, this is a unique opportunity for me and for our audience as well. Anyone watching. Because whenever we talk, it's always work, as Rihanna would say. A lot of work. And, me as a writer personally, I would like to pick your brain and get to know you a little better. How does that sound?
Why not? What else are we going to do here?
Why not? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, but I am a firm believer that, especially in the world of artists, in our world, connection is incredibly important. Not saying that just because artists sort of share their work with the world, they owe their audience a piece of themselves beyond that. But with that being said, do you think that it's important for the audience to know their favorite authors and writers on a deeper level?
It's an interesting question. I think it is very circumstantial. It's wonderful that we have access to authors and people who aren't authors. We have contact with their thoughts in a way that we obviously didn't before the internet, and access to their lives. And I was just talking to somebody today who had a friend who, in the very early days of the internet, he just friended, a lot of his favorite authors and famous authors. And it was back when you kind of do that, and they'd be like, "Oh wow, Andy, I know Andy. He friended me on Facebook, and he read my last story." So there's this kind of nice story of somebody having intimate connections with their favorite authors. And that might happen, doesn't happen exactly that way these days, but it can be very nice to be in touch with your favorite authors and get their thoughts on a bunch of different things. I was gonna say, on the other hand, though, sometimes it's really nice not to know your favorite author. Sometimes it's nice to know them only through their novels or their interviews with magazines and stuff. And I think I say that because I think there's an intimacy that's created, a mystery and intrigue, and to not really know someone, to not know every one of their tweets. There's a value in that too, and
I thought you meant we don't want to be disappointed because writers are not as cool as they are in their books.
And well, that can happen too. So there's a hazard to getting to know them too well, or or just them tweeting too much about their lives. Maybe, I don't know. It's a tough equation, and that's why I say it's really circumstantial. Um, yeah, but on the other hand, like a lot of writers are out there. Like a lot of writers right now are giving NaNoWriMo advice online, and that's like wonderful. A lot of writers talk about their creative process. A lot of
Yeah.
writers talk about their creative struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And so like as a writer, like I always used to think writers, they find an agent, they find an editor, they get all this success, it's all easy for them, they never have
Yeah.
face rejection. But that's actually quite false. It's still a struggle. They still face a lot of possible rejection.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think like having this window into their lives can be really beneficial to kind of set expectations for aspiring authors.
Yeah, and you're raising an interesting point about the people who surround the writers, and we are still struggling. Now, you and your lovely wife Heather, who is also a writer, you two are like a power couple, like Jay-Z and Beyonce of the writing world. And
That's the way we like to think of ourselves. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the way I have you. I have you.
Good. Thank you. You're seeing us accurately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like what's really fascinating to me about people whose families exist in the same profession, especially when they are writers, is that writing is a lonely profession, can be. So we form book clubs and writing groups to literally not write alone. So my question is, I guess, for anyone who finds themselves in the same situation as you, having a family member who is able to give an educated opinion, do you recommend dragging your family's professional opinion on your writing into the picture, or would your advice be, hey, family's family, work is work, keep that separate, and find your writing tribe somewhere else?
It's a really interesting thing. I mean, with writing couples, I've heard all types of stories. I've heard of the couple who every time the writer writes a page and prints it out, it's immediately handed to his or her partner and read and talked about, in this kind of idyllic state. I truly don't quite understand that, but it's nice that those stories exist in the world. I think, speaking personally for Heather and me, it's more about an ongoing conversation about books and about the writing life in general. We don't read each other's work and provide critiques.
That's what I wanted to know. Do you read each other's work?
I
Do you
mean,
edit it?
I mean, on occasion, but we're actually both writers who don't seek feedback for our work. We do write very privately, and I'm usually not ready for feedback until well along in the process, and we do work in different genres, and we do have a different aesthetic, and so I think when we do, and we in the end we have editors too, so we don't talk about our specific work so much. And I think anybody you talk about your specific work in the context of getting feedback, it's always a very, very delicate relationship. And I think you should really think about who you ask to do that for you, and then how you guide that conversation. I think and I always tell this story. I learned it early on in my writing life. I was in my early 20s, and I gave a story to one of my best friends, just thinking, okay, he's a good reader. He loves reading. He'll read this and he'll give me some fabulous critique. Maybe he'll even say, what a fabulous story. You're an amazing writer. And he didn't respond. And I said, I had to follow up finally. I said, why haven't you responded to the story? And he's like, I'm your friend. I didn't ask to be your critic. And that sounds harsh, but it's actually true. It's actually true. He didn't ask to be my critic, and I didn't ask him if he was comfortable in that role. Right. And so it's just a lesson in that don't foist that role upon people, and to really think about who you're asking, why you're asking them to be your critic, and then think about how you want to guide them. Sometimes you do just want somebody to say, hey, that's so great, you wrote that story, I really enjoyed it. And sometimes you want them to go deeper and offer you specific critiques, And so I think having there are a bunch of stuff you can Google, but just think about what questions you'd like to ask them and how you would like them to read that story. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, that's very empathetic way to look at it, because writers I love us all, but we do get a little self-absorbed, and we always look at, oh, how is this feedback going to make me feel, instead of, is anyone asking me to provide this? So it's really, it's great that you think about it this way. And
it's a big thing to ask somebody. They're going to give up a lot of time for you, right?
Yeah.
And it's emotional for them as well. Giving feedback is really tough, giving good feedback. And a lot of times people do. It breaks up their friendships. It wedges relationships. So you have to be very thoughtful about it on both ends.
Okay, so your
Yeah.
general advice is probably don't mix work and private stuff, probably.
It just depends, you know.
Mhm.
Like some people, this friend didn't want to be my critic, but some friends might. You know, and it's
Fine.
kind of like thinking about what do they have to give and what can they give you.
Yeah.
But you know, the common writer advice is like don't give your stories to your parents, or grandparents or whatever. Like don't because like again they're kind of in the same role. They might say I think usually that advice is given just because your mom is going to say, oh, you're so precious, what a great story, and that's not really feedback. That's fine. Um,
Yeah.
but I've actually heard the opposite. I've heard oftentimes parents, can have the most devastating kind of
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
critique
Oh
or
yeah.
make,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's very,
Absolutely.
very,
Yeah.
very,
One of my family members, like the worst feedback I ever got was, "I don't get it," and I was like,
right,
"You
right,
really don't get it? Like you don't
right.
get the story, or you don't get what you're supposed to say?" And they were like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, never mind."
Yeah.
Never
Or they don't get why you're a writer. They don't
Yeah,
get,
they
you
don't
know,
get why I'm a writer.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, again, I think like in that case, they probably didn't want to be a critic, or they need
Mhm.
some guidance, like
Yeah,
sometimes a very specific guidance. Sometimes like, is my
for
main
sure.
character believable?
Yeah,
Or
for sure.
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah.
Now, Grant, your name is synonymous with NaNoWriMo now. Obviously, you're running the show.
Hmm.
But you weren't always the CEO of NaNoWriMo. You took over from founder Chris Baty in 2012. And
Hmm.
man, I can't imagine the pressure. I think that's what Tim Cook must have felt like taking over from Steve Jobs. But then again, much like Tim Cook, like he was already experienced in the business long before he took over. You advanced the brand, you made some changes, made your own. So my question is, what challenges did you face when taking over?
Yeah, I think Tim Cook is actually a good analogy, and that's one I've thought about a lot because Chris Baty, for those people who don't know him, is this fantastically
Yeah,
charismatic guy. He's just amazing. He's an amazing
yeah,
person, and
yeah,
he NaNoWriMo was and is him in so many ways. I mean, he had this really interesting, infectious, unique spirit that just
yeah,
infused and still infuses like all we do, and so he was a very beloved figure. And
yeah.
I think like taking over, it's certainly a challenge to be in the shadow of that. But I think in the end it's like you're not trying to be that other person, you have to be
Mm-hmm,
yourself,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
you have to think about what you have to give.
mm-hmm,
And you also have to be in service to the organization. It's not about
mm-hmm,
you as a
mm-hmm.
person. So I always viewed it as like I am serving NaNoWriMo, this fantastic organization, and I'm serving the staff and the volunteers and the participants, and everything we do has to be for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes it a lot easier when you think about it not as your own ego that's at stake, or whether people love you or don't,
Yeah.
but being in service to something that's larger than you. And
Mhm.
that was very easy to do with NaNoWriMo because we were all about empowering people to believe in themselves and to put their
Yeah.
voices in the world, and that their story matters. And
Yeah.
that's something deep in my heart, my own personal mission. So it's very easy for me to like then transfer that to NaNoWriMo and be a steward of the organization, really. So I didn't try to be Chris Baty, and if I had tried to
Mhm.
be Chris Baty, it would have been foolhardy, because like I said, he's got his own unique charm, and I don't think anyone can
Yeah.
really. If you try to emulate Chris's charm, you'll be very deep in second place. You'll not be,
Oh,
you have to find, like, it's like our mission for the organization. You have to find your own charm, your own voice, your own story.
your
You know,
swagger, basically.
yeah, your own swagger, or your own non-swagger, your own ability,
Your swagger.
your own ability to listen and to be with people and to help them tell their story. Yeah.
No, that's very noble of you. And it's really interesting to me what you're saying, because like you said, you have a certain responsibility for the brand, and the brand can easily overtake your life because you are running the show. You're responsible for this huge organization.
Hmm.
And as a writer, because you are a writer at your core, how do you reconcile the logistics of running a business with your inner need for artistic expression? Because you're still a person and you still need to write.
I am still a person. Thank you
Yes.
for observing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have a need to write.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of the lucky ones, you know. I mean,
Hmm.
my constant dilemma in life as a writer has been to find the job that supports me as a writer. And
Yeah.
so in my 20s, I waited tables and I worked in bookstores and I actually waited tables and worked in bookstores because I could work a night shift and then
Mm.
have the days free to read and write. And I
Yeah.
did that very intentionally. And so, you know,
Mm.
and so a writer always faces the dilemma of what do you do to earn a living and how
Yeah.
much do you invest in your career
Yeah.
versus how much do you invest in your writing. And I was just talking to somebody today. I had a meeting and I kind of presented it. I made a joke. I was like, you know, my 20s, all my entrepreneurial energy was focused on being a writer. And, you
Hmm.
know, like the irony of that is that I really did just totally self sabotage my career. You know, if you judge a career by earning money, at least, you know, which I,
Yeah.
because I didn't earn much money. But I'm one of the blessed ones because I mean, everybody has to work, almost
Hmm.
everybody.
Yeah.
Very few people escape that. So
Mhm.
I myself am going to have to work no matter what. And
Hmm.
so the fact that I get to work, even though, like you said, I'm a business person,
Yeah.
running an org, a lot, even though it's a nonprofit, even though it's a creative writing
It's
organization,
still a business.
it's still a business. It's still a job. I still stare at a
Yeah.
computer long time during the day
Yeah.
and go to Zoom meetings. But I'm, you know, it's NaNoWriMo. It's like I get to be in touch with all these amazing people who,
Hmm.
whether they're writers or volunteers or people like
Hmm.
you and your companies, or people outside of NaNoWriMo, you know, it's all of it feeds into me creatively.
Yeah.
So the fact that I get to work, no matter what my worst day is, how many emails I have to respond to, or how many
Yeah.
meetings I have to go to, you
Yeah.
know, somehow it's always about writing. You know, so this is a very fortunate position I'm in. So I don't like
Absolutely.
the reconciliation between those two worlds is pretty easy. You know,
Hmm.
my wife actually works at a Silicon Valley, you know, data company that I can't even describe what they do, and
Yeah.
that's a whole different like ecosystem to be in. So there's a whole, it's a sharper divide there, you know, that I think, I mean, because I've worked for a corporation and
Yeah.
very distant from writing as well, and you're going to a whole different territory when you go to those jobs. And so
Yeah.
I think it's much more difficult to reconcile your day to day work with your creative life, or it was for me. But
I think it
it's
is
not
for
that.
everybody. Yeah. I don't think you're
Yeah,
alone in that.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you're. So I'm lucky. Yeah, so it's not. I don't think about it as reconciling it. And get to go back to the previous answer. I mean, I get to be in service to helping, you know, this whole grand purpose to help people tell their stories, which I
Yeah.
do think makes the world a better place. So I feel pretty good about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that was so wholesome. No, yeah, listen, I absolutely agree. Now, again, like I know you, I work with you, so I know what NaNoWriMo is all about. I know your mission. But for those who don't or not that very well acquainted with NaNoWriMo, it's a nonprofit, as you mentioned, meaning that you are constantly in search of valuable partnerships that can support the cause. How do you determine the value of a partner before you accept them into the ecosystem?
Yeah, we're a nonprofit, which means we need funding, and we don't,
Mhm.
you know, seek to use what we do. Making money isn't our primary purpose.
Yeah.
Our primary purpose is to do good in the world, and that's how we have a social impact. And so, you know, we get most of our revenue. I mean, one, to run a nonprofit, I've always wanted to have as many diverse revenue streams as possible, so that one year one goes bad, you've got strength in another
Oh,
area.
backup plans. Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Not even backup plans, but just like you know, you're going to have like one revenue stream not produce as much one
Mm.
year as it will the next. So we most of our funding actually comes from small donations from our participants. You know, we're talking $10 or $20, and we get thousands of people in our community who donate that, and that's our
And it makes a
primary.
difference.
It makes a difference, and that's our primary fundraising basis, not grants. We also sell like merchandise in our store. You know, T-shirts and mugs go a
Yeah.
long way to funding NaNoWriMo. And then yeah, we have sponsors, and
Hmm.
basically, you know, I want to look to a sponsor as a company to see if they are genuinely interested in helping writers. You know, and if they
Hmm.
have a decent product, and
Hmm.
yeah, that's basically it. You know, just like vet them for their reputation and their mission.
Right. I mean, it's not. I mean, when you say it like that, it just sounds so straightforward and so simple. But when you get into the nitty gritty of it, I imagine that it's not. I mean, it must be difficult. And as you mentioned, it certainly helps that it's about writing.
Mhm.
And one of your I'm interested because one of your other creative ventures, the 100 word story,
Mhm.
is fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating. I didn't know that that was even possible to write any kind of story. So I was wondering, how did you come up with that? Like, was it like just one day at in the office and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I need to go back to writing.
It's
So,
funny. I'd been working on a novel for like 10 years off and on, and
mhm.
a friend of mine's father posted that he'd published 9 100-word stories in this literary journal, and he had written a whole collection of 100 100-word stories that were his
Yeah.
memoir. And when I read them, I thought they were so fascinating because each little story was a story unto itself that really did have a beginning, middle, and end, and a little character
Uh-huh.
change and twist in the end. And I became, the stories like were like this, like one of those Kodak carousels where the photograph
Oh yeah.
snaps up, and
Yeah.
it was like a collage of photos, all these
Yeah.
little snapshots.
Uh-huh.
And so I started writing them with a friend, and I found it just to be a nice break from that doomed novel, that 10-year novel. And it
Mm.
provided a sense of satisfaction because I could complete the story. And
Hmm.
then when I started getting them published, there was also that, publishing like kind of fuels your creative juices.
It
And
does. Yeah.
so it helped me kind of balance that kind of long project with these short projects. And then I was
Hmm.
thinking about this, and this is now in the early days of the internet. This is like 2010. It's hard to
Mm.
remember back to the internet then, but there
It is.
there weren't many literary journals focused on flash fiction. There were very few, and flash fiction is defined as stories that are 1,000 words or less. And so I said,
Yeah.
what if we did a whole magazine focused on just 100-word stories? And so that's what we do. And
Yeah.
it's not 101 word, it's not 99
It's
words.
100.
You have to work within that constraint.
Yeah.
But a constraint brings out a different type of creativity, like you have to think differently about what a story is. And it
Hmm.
teaches you to write a story through hints and suggestions. So
Hmm.
you're really writing about things like a lot of the story is omitted. You have to
Hmm.
trust the
Hmm.
reader to fill
Yeah.
in the gaps. That's the
Yeah.
kind of key to it. And so the stories have this like interesting poetry. And so I always say my attraction to the form is kind of as a failed poet. It allows me to be a poet in a
Ooh.
way in a way that like a novel doesn't. Not that you
Yeah.
can't have poetic prose in a novel, but a novel is like just so much bigger. A novel is like a southwestern city. You can build out to the horizon and just keep building structures and
Yeah.
expanding in all directions. But a 100-word story is just like it's like a little town with mountains around it. You don't have any space to expand. So everything you do in terms of like your urban planning in that town has to be very thoughtful, very meticulous.
No, that's
So
such a beautiful metaphor. Are you a writer or something?
yeah,
No.
so I just to plug something, I just wrote a book called The Art of Brevity
Yeah.
that has all these thoughts in it, and it just went up on the University of New Mexico's website and Amazon and bookshop.org. So I
Yay.
encourage I encourage you, Zara, and all the millions of people watching us right now to get it published. Yeah.
Oh no, listen, absolutely. It's this is the part where you do the shameless plug, so thank you for doing
Oh,
that.
was that a shameless plug? I'm
That
sorry.
was absolutely a shameless plug, and
Okay,
you know
okay.
that.
I didn't think it was. I thought it was kind of subtle.
It was very, listen, it was so subtle. I didn't
Yeah.
even notice.
I don't think. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the publishing as well, because we talk a lot about writing and creativity and all that stuff. But NaNoWriMo is it's connected to the publishing world, whether you want it or not. It's just sort of
Mhm,
one of
mhm.
those things. And I do agree with you. Like, publishing can be very powerful because it can be a great motivator. Like this sort of it gives you confidence to go on. It feels like, you have an audience now, you're a writer. So with that in mind, as the publishing industry changes and evolves, because
Mhm.
it does, especially after the pandemic, do you plan on implementing any changes into the operations of NaNoWriMo with regards to what's going on, or do you just sort of do your own thing and the rest will figure itself out?
Yeah, I mean, we are focused on the rough draft, and we are focused on
Yeah.
helping people believe that their story matters, and we are focused on
Yeah.
developing a community of storytellers. So,
Yeah.
so our main focus isn't about really helping people get published. I mean, it's amazing
Yeah.
and we're blessed to have so many people who write their novels with NaNoWriMo, and so many of them have won awards and had best-selling novels, and
Yeah.
are published in some regard. So we do offer it, but that said, as you said, like a lot of people do want to get published when they start NaNoWriMo, and we want to be
Yeah.
there to support writers the best we can at all stages of writing. So we
Yeah.
have a program called I Wrote a Novel, Now What, that happens in January and
Yeah.
February, and it focuses on helping people revise their novels and then also consider what publishing options are best for them, and then
Yeah.
how to best equip themselves to follow the publishing, kind of choose their publishing journey and be
Yeah.
successful in it. So we don't go deep into those things, but we do provide some initial guidance and provide a framework and
Right.
create a conversation around it. And so in terms of changes, I wouldn't say that we're not going to change anything because of publishing,
Hmm.
but there might be opportunities that open up
Right.
as publishing changes, because publishing is changing so dramatically.
Yeah.
And also, we'll do what we can to help people get there.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't say that we're not gonna focus on making NaNoWriMo kind of a publishing boot camp.
Right.
It's more about a boot camp to write your novel.
To write your novel. Right.
Yeah, to
Oh
write that
my
thing.
God, you're like a puppet master, just working in a shed, just slowly nudging people in the right direction, but in the right direction, like the
Yeah.
opposite of a puppet master in a way that you are helping them actually.
Let's hope. Let's hope, Sarah. Let's hope that we're both
No,
providing
absolutely.
some help to someone today.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Now talking about NaNoWriMo, you talking about the people that participated, how they don't believe in themselves. I'm curious, what changes, if any, in participation or in the demographic of NaNoWriMo participants have you noticed since the pandemic began? Like, did it go up? Because like people were at home and they're like, "What? Well, let's just write. There's nothing else to do. Let's join NaNoWriMo. Let's write."
Yeah, early on, we had a huge spike of
Mm,
writers, and I think that was back in the days, like the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was like, "Oh, I'll make some sourdough bread and take a photo of it and post on Instagram, and I'll write a
mhm.
novel." But I think some of that initial zest for writing and for crossing items off your bucket list kind of became dampened as the grind of the pandemic kind of wore on.
Yeah.
So we didn't necessarily see a drop, but we did see a flattening of novelists during that time. I mean,
Hmm.
if you think back to 2020, like there was a lot going on in the world, and people were.
Say
I
the
mean,
least.
we did hear from people that they were, the anxiety and
Yeah.
the trauma they felt did prevent them from wanting to be creative, and I totally understood that.
Interesting.
And so our numbers are good this year, as good as they're as healthy as they were last year,
Good,
and
good.
so I think it speaks to just like what I always say. We are all storytellers.
Yeah.
Telling stories is the way we make meaning in the world. We're driven to tell stories, and
Hmm.
we're all writers and can be writers. And there's a huge appetite for people
Hmm.
to write their stories.
Yeah.
So I'm very comforted by that. That no
Oh
matter
yeah.
what happens, no matter what, no, I mean, there's just so many good reasons to write. And you can write for escape, just to get away from the world and give yourself from relief from all the serious stuff we have to deal with. Or you
Oh
can write a novel that actually deals with all that serious stuff.
yeah.
I mean, everybody has their entry point to it, and one is just as valuable as the other. So
Hmm.
there's just a million reasons about why you should write.
Oh, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of many people who maybe don't understand why we do this is that they don't understand the correlation between this is our coping mechanism. Whether we do it in fiction, nonfiction, or we write about real stuff or non-real stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it's still a way to cope with things. So I really appreciate
Totally.
you pointing that out. And in terms of writing specifically, you mentioned that sort of you try to help people believe in their story. Now I'm interested to hear, how do you go about it? Because there has to be some sort of core belief. Obviously there's nuance, and I want to hear particularly about the nuance, but do you
Mm-hmm.
believe that writing can be taught as a skill? Because it is taught in universities, like it's a thing, creative writing. But do you believe that it can be taught as a skill, or do you believe it's purely a matter of talent?
Uh, all the above and more. I think the best way to learn to write a novel is to do it. I think it's really, you can read a lot of how to write a novel books and take courses, but until
Yeah.
you it's an interesting beast to experience. And
Mm.
so I think really like experiencing it and trying to write yourself is the best way. But
Yeah.
then I think all that instruction helps. It's
Mhm.
great to read craft books. It's great to take workshops and hear from beloved writers, or
Yeah.
wise writers. So yeah, I mean, yes, it can be taught, but it's a mysterious thing. It's not like teaching, I don't know, teaching how to build a toy wooden horse, like
Yeah, there's not really a process that you can, I mean, formula, I should say.
well, yeah, so much of the learning is going to happen in the doing and the reading,
Mm.
and it's going to take time, and yeah, so it's just, but it can be taught, yeah, and but you can also teach yourself. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh.
So
That's
sometimes,
interesting.
and a lot of it is a belief structure. You mentioned like that we try to help people believe in their voice. I
Yeah.
mean, people, if you're writing with fear, or writing with doubt, writing feeling that you're an imposter, if you're doing these things that in the end they kind of wear away your creativity, they take away
Hmm.
your creative boldness. And the best writing really happens with boldness,
Yeah.
and bravery, and which also means the ability to make yourself vulnerable on the page, because when people
Yeah.
make themselves vulnerable on the page, they're more likely to connect to a reader. They're also
Hmm.
more likely to connect to themselves. So I think, like, those are all considerations. I always say, the craft books I mentioned earlier, the how
Yeah.
to write a novel books, sometimes
Yeah.
those are less important than just having the right creative mindset and developing that
Yeah.
creative mindset. And that's really what we do at NaNoWriMo. We don't really tell people how to write a novel, but we do try to help them develop a belief in themselves. And we do that, through our pep talks and our resources and webcasts
Hmm.
like this, but we also do it through our community. And that's
Yeah.
where NaNoWriMo is different than a lot of organizations, is that we have this community. There are nearly 1,000 volunteers called municipal liaisons around the world, hosting
Yeah.
in-person writing events, or writing events like with Zoom, and really
Yeah.
encouraging people to believe in their stories and write, and doing writing games, and they're
Yeah.
coaches and therapists and teachers, and they crack the whip on you. They're accountability masters. Anyway, and then we have this huge online presence as well, in a variety of ways. So it's a community is it offers both accountability, but also this kind of emotional support that's very important.
Yeah. As you mentioned that the how is not really important, I think I'm inclined to agree with you because the way people write keeps changing all the time. Like, for example, I read your blog, and your famous namesake William Faulkner, who you feel naturally connected to, wrote one of my favorite novels of all time. And the stream of consciousness, quote unquote, kind of writing was not very popular back then. And yet, As I Lay Dying is considered a classic now. So what I want to know is, what is your advice to writers who are not sure about venturing out and breaking from the traditional constraints of today's storytelling? Would you encourage them to go out and do it? Would you encourage them to study someone like William Faulkner or Kurt Vonnegut or whoever sort of was not did not write within the constraints of, let's say, linear chronological storytelling?
Yeah, I think you always have to be in service to your story, and
Okay.
you have to think, what does this story want? What is the best way to tell this story? And
Hmm.
and if that happens to be stream of consciousness, then yes, go for it.
Yeah.
I think that's part of having that boldness that I was talking about, and that vulnerability. I mean,
Yeah.
when William Faulkner wrote like that, it was bold, but he was also making himself very vulnerable. And
Yeah.
on the publishing front, as you mentioned, it wasn't it had carried risks with it. So
Yeah.
I would say, if you're writing a genre romance novel, or some sort of like more genre oriented novel, and if you
Hmm.
really want to publish it, then some of those more experimental techniques might not be the place for that. And so that's when you have to weigh: do I want it to be published, or do I want to like serve the story with
Right.
this like voice and this experimentation that I see
Hmm. Hmm.
that is a good way to do it. So it's a decision point, and but that's only really if you're thinking about publishing. I think otherwise, like, being in service to the story is such a
Put
just
the
a
story first.
gratifying thing. Yeah.
Yeah, put the story first. Right. So, I mean, talking about the story, let's talk about the topic that is very relevant to writers who are now in the midst of NaNoWriMo, which is what happens when you hit the midpoint of your book.
Mhm.
When you and I discussed this, you called it the muddy middle, which is the first time I've heard that term, and it's probably the most accurate description you could have used. So let's talk about it. What did you mean by muddy, and why do you think writers hit the midpoint and are suddenly thrown off by their own story?
Yeah, I think, and some people aren't. So thank God that some people are just kind of skating through
True.
the muddy middle, or they're just enjoying their novel so much
The
that
muddy middle.
they're not hitting that spot. But I think a lot of writers do, and it's just because
Hmm.
people have been writing pretty intensely for the first week or two, and it's easier at the beginning of a novel to be more exuberant about it, and then the deeper you get into it, it's easier to kind of question the story.
Say with your chest, we have a breakdown when we hit the midpoint. Just say, you can
Yeah,
say it out loud. There's a mental breakdown. That's why it doesn't work.
yeah, you start. I mean, I think a lot of people do. It's like they start to question the story, but they also start to question themselves. And this is
Yeah.
again where developing the
Yeah.
creative mindset really comes in, to believe
Yeah.
in yourself and to believe in your story, and also to recognize that everybody is gonna have those like muddy middles.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say plural. It doesn't happen once in a novel.
Mm,
It happens
all the time.
frequently. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be points where you're either burned out mentally or physically from writing it, or the story
Hmm.
just, if you've been working on it for 2 or 3 years, the story might not be speaking to you for a week or a month or
Hmm.
6 months, and so you have to like just recognize that that happens to everybody, and then think about ways to refresh yourself. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's stepping away. And so in the context of NaNoWriMo, you might take a day off. You might
Yeah.
go on a long walk. You might go to a movie. You might you might not work on your computer. You might write by longhand instead. You might do what if exercises, or go to the NaNoWriMo word sprints account and do some word sprints. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to deal with it. And so I think as a writer, you just kind of have to think about what you're feeling and how you can replenish yourself creatively.
I think
Yeah.
refreshing and replenishing is are the key words here, because everybody has, as I mentioned, different coping mechanisms. For me personally, to refresh, as you said, means to sort of get away from the NaNoWriMo project itself. I'm not doing NaNoWriMo this year, but last year I was. And what I found very comforting was basically completely disregarding what I was doing with NaNoWriMo, and I started working on something completely different. It was still writing, so I was still like stretching the muscle, but it was a shorter project, sort of like what you did with the 100-word story. But I was writing for magazines and articles and all that stuff, which is something that you are very well versed in as well. I mean, you've been a contributing writer to several literary journals and magazines, and among them the New York Times as well. And so for those who would like to do the same thing, even during NaNoWriMo, to sort of, if that is their coping mechanism and sort of the replenishing system that they need,
Hmm.
do you have a straightforward formula that we can follow to achieve the same success as you and be published in high profile magazines? Or is it just sort of complicated like
Uh,
everything else?
yes, I do have that, Zara, and it's $19.99. It's available on my website. So it's the Grant Faulkner formula to being guaranteed publication in the New York Times. That's the working title right now. So
I mean,
yeah, $19.99, and then please leave a tip if you can. And
damn
yeah,
it. I already pay my bills. I can't. I'm done
yeah.
for this month.
I'm afraid I don't have a formula. I mean, getting published is a variety of things.
Hmm.
Sometimes you just send in a pitch or a story,
Right.
and they like the pitch and the story, or they go for it. And sometimes it's
Hmm.
about, in the case of the New York Times, I had a friend who had written for them, and she actually provided an introduction to the editor overseeing that section. And so that made it a little bit easier for me to then email her
Yeah.
and say, hey, I have this article idea. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's about having access.
No, listen,
And
I really appreciate you like like getting real here, because I was going to ask you, like, with New York Times Magazine specifically and other high profile publications, do you truly need like somebody to grandfather you in, or like can we, so I really appreciate you saying that. Yes. I had there was nepotism, and
yeah,
I'm
well,
proud.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it wasn't nepotism, but it was a connection.
Friend, yes,
and
yeah, a
and
connection, yeah,
I think it's important. I mean, that's one reason to nourish a community and a network, and to
yeah,
go to a lot of things like conferences, and to to put yourself out there in the world, to mixing with writers, because oftentimes they are the ones who will
yeah,
open the door for you or make introductions. And so,
yeah,
for a publication like the New York Times, I mean, I'm sure you can get published by pitching them stories.
yeah.
There's this great story. I forget his name. What's his name? He's a New Yorker cartoonist, and he came out with a memoir recently, and he was on my
Mhm.
podcast, but I'm forgetting his name. But anyway, he and the New Yorker, actually, I didn't know this. They take submissions for their cartoons, and so
Mm,
he submitted cartoons to the New Yorker for decades, until
nothing.
they accepted one, and
Hmm.
and then they started accepting them more frequently. But he still does the same thing. Like, he literally goes down and
Yeah,
delivers the cartoons, like, in an envelope, and he
that's
comes back.
awesome.
Yeah. It's a really old world kind of submission process, but it is, then as an outsider, somebody who doesn't have an intro, you can get in.
Yeah,
But it's, whatever. It's again, I don't want to. I Publishing is not necessarily based on what the best story is. There are a lot of fantastic stories that do not get published, and that's because they don't have the right access. So,
yeah. Oh, and
so
you told me this many times before, like even with NaNoWriMo, that basically there's only one winner, but you also wish that there could be more because there's so many fantastic writers participating.
oh no, there's many winners. There's not just one, right? Did you
Uh,
quote?
I, but the one who gets like the main prize, you know what I mean?
No.
There, there's there's the main prize of $50,000, correct?
Yeah, no prize. Everybody wins who's written 50,000 words.
Oh,
Um,
everybody who's written 50. Okay, okay, okay. Then I
yeah,
must be
so
mistaken.
I mean, I view everybody. I mean, you're a type of winner just by starting your novel, and then
Hmm.
you are like a NaNoWriMo winner when you reach 50,000 words. And so we don't give out cash prizes.
Okay.
We give a digital certificate, and we give winner goodies and things like that. We give a little laurel on your profile. But yeah, it's not about one winner at all. We're all.
Why was I convinced that there was a cash prize? Didn't you guys used to run something like that, or am I completely off? Am I mistaking
No.
this with something? No.
Sometimes sponsors run contests, and they might run like Avon
Oh, okay.
Romance once ran a contest, and they promised to publish at least one book from NaNoWriMo, and they got 500
Oh,
or 1,000 submissions, something like that, and they did publish one. So
okay.
things like that. But we don't.
Okay.
We're. I mean, yeah, no, we don't do that. No,
Right.
sorry.
So you basically contests are possible through NaNoWriMo, but it's not run by NaNoWriMo.
Exactly. Yeah,
Allowed.
we're all about celebrating the act of writing, and we view anybody who reaches
Okay.
50,000 words as winning the event. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Now I got it. All
Yeah.
right then. Well, my final question for you,
Okay.
final words of wisdom from you. What is your advice to up and coming writers?
Um, I'm trying to think if I have anything that it could truly be special and never before heard, but I don't think I do, because um, part of learning how to write is like developing that writing muscle. And they say that you have to put in 10,000 hours to reach mastery in anything. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
that that's technically true, but it's kind of metaphorically true. You
Yeah.
have to write thousands of pages. Ray
Mm-hmm.
Bradbury said that too. He called them throwaway pages. And so NaNoWriMo, I always say it's one part boot camp, and that boot camp is part of that, like getting the discipline to show up every day to write, to put in that 10,000 hours. But it's one part party, and so we make it fun, and we provide the fun happens really on the community side. And so I
Yeah.
think that honoring both of those, that read and write a lot, and then have uh, supportive friends, and also
Yeah.
friends who you can talk about books and writing with. Have a bring your you were talking about reconciling your creativity with your work.
Yeah.
Try to bring them together, try to bring your creativity into your work, and vice versa.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. No, I think that's lovely. And listen, you don't like there doesn't need to be a huge ancient philosophy behind everything that experienced people say to the world. You know what I mean? Because I feel like anytime there's a guest on any show, any talk show who is successful, I feel like people turn on their TVs, tune in and expect to hear something life changing. When in fact it's just like, you need to sit down and work, and that's about it.
Zara, are you saying that my advice was not life changing?
No.
Are you saying it wasn't good advice?
No, I wouldn't. Oh, come on, I would never.
Do you want some better wisdom?
I would listen. Your wisdom is everything that I ever hope for it to be.
Okay.
No. What I'm saying is, there
joking.
is. I think that it could be very disappointing to hear something like that. That basically there's no magic formula, but at the same time. Yeah, but at the same time, it could be
I do. There is actually. It's for sale, $19.99
for $19.
On my website. Yeah.
Damn it! Listen,
I'll do the formula to get published and the magic formula for if you buy two, it'll be $29.99.
You need to come on the show when it's before I pay the rent. I cannot afford this right now. So
okay. I'm sorry.
Afterwards.
Okay. We got plenty in stock. Plenty in stock.
Oh my God. So yeah, the magic formula that basically doesn't exist. As I was saying, like it could be very disappointing, but at the same time, I think empowering as well, because it helps you regain control of your life and empower you to start doing the work. Because the goal of NaNoWriMo, the 50,000 words that people strive to achieve, you really can go, you can't do anything but sit down and write. Like there's no way around it. So it only makes sense for you to say that work, I guess, and patience is the only way to go.
Work and patience are two big things.
Two big things.
Two big things in the process, and I think and taking joy in the work and finding meaning in the work and being driven by the work, because in the end it's getting published is a joy, and it can be very meaningful, and it can be very important to people, but in the end you have to like the writing. The writing is, and you have to, I think in the end you have to find the writing as it's the gift itself, and so look for a gift in your words. Don't look for the gift as reaching some, I don't know, some victory stand someplace. The victory stand is in your pen.
Oh, that's beautiful. But now listen, you didn't say what we were all expecting you to say, which is if you want to become an up and coming writer, you need to join NaNoWriMo this year, and that will be your propeller towards great success.
It'll be for your propeller towards finding the gift of your story, and that is great success.
It is. Oh, that was so poetic. Absolutely. Now, Grant, we have some questions in the chat from our audience. You game for being interrogated for some more?
Yeah, I love these questions. Yeah.
Let's do it. So Noah commented.
People been watching?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Imagine that. People actually want to hear what you want to say. Imagine that. No, so Noah said Jay-Z and Beyonce of the writing world. Yes, exactly. And there's actually a question from Welby Brodus. And the question is, can nonfiction authors write through NaNoWriMo? Interesting.
Welby, we want you to write your nonfiction novel in NaNoWriMo. We say, I mean, we want everybody to write. NaNoWriMo is about galvanizing people to write. And so we say, if you call it a novel, we call it a novel. But really, we just want to meet writers where they are. We don't want to discourage anyone or not allow anyone in. So we have this whole group called Nano Rebels who are, they're like doing things other than writing a novel. So there's plenty of room for that. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And Kyra, who you know, says hi.
Hey, Kyra. Good
to
see you. Good to see you.
Oh my God. Yeah. Now, Grant, thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a privilege and an honor to interview and to work with you. And yeah, I mean, we will stay in touch.
Good.
Do you have any final confessions or?
Confessions? Oh my God.
Yes. Yes, that's what we do here. Like final wisdom, which you've already given us, and then final confessions.
Final wisdom, which wasn't considered wisdom.
Oh, come
Confessions.
on. I will never live this down. Oh my God.
Confessions. I have a confession.
Okay.
I haven't told anyone this.
Okay.
I'm below my word count target for the month.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
I'm behind. And here's the thing: I'm having a very, very crazy busy month,
Mm.
and it's gonna be
Oh, I'm
tough for
sure
me
you.
to catch up. But I'm gonna focus on the streak. Like I've written every day. I've written something, and so I'm
Right.
focusing on my 18. Tomorrow it'll be 18 days. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's different ways. Like we say, a goal and a deadline is a creative midwife. Well, one goal can be writing 50,000 words in a month, but another goal can just be the streak to write every day
Yeah.
for the month. And so, since I know that getting the word count this year will be tough, I'm going to focus on the streak. So even if I can only write 23 words, I'm going to write 23 words. Usually, I find if you write 23 words, it turns into 46, and then 92, and then 184, and then things just keep moving. So that's the
And then you
thing.
can submit to your own journal for publication.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is to keep my deep writing wisdom that comes from the most ancient of eras is to keep writing.
Keep writing. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No.
Listen, folks, as you heard it here, Grant Faulkner himself is behind the word count, so don't feel bad about it if you are as well. We will all catch up. Now, again, thank you, Grant, so much. And yeah, I will see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you for this spirited, lively interview. It was a joy.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, well, that was incredibly insightful. Again, huge thanks to Grant for being such a gracious guest. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Next week, we are getting back into our regularly scheduled drama, aka the writing sprints. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you with my colleagues next week.